Moving into our five things for this week, Gary, we're talking CPI right out of the gate. Thing number one, the CPI comes in high and is still understated.
Yeah, so the March CPI, that stands for Consumer Price Index, and that is typically the gauge that people look at when we talk about inflation. Now, is it really a correct and proper measure of inflation? No, not even close, but that's how we view it. Um, that came in for March at 3.5%. Now, is that a big deal? Yeah, it really is. And the reason is because last month was 3.2%. Now we're back up to 3.5%. That kills the disinflation story. And this is something we've talked about a lot. For people who don't love or remember their high school calculus, disinflation is a change in the rate of change. It's basically saying we still have inflation, but less inflation than we had before. We have increasing prices, but prices are increasing at a slower rate. Well, when your CPI goes from 3.2% to 3.5%, that's not disinflation, that's increasing inflation. The other thing is it was higher than expectations, and even worse, the monthly number was 0.4%. And this is something that we talk about a lot. So people might say, well, wait a minute, do we really care about 0.4%? Right? If something, if something costs $100, do you really care if it's another 40 cents? Well, no, but the issue is that's a month over month number. And when you annualize 0.4% across 12 months, it annualizes to 4.9%. And when your inflation target is 2%, which I will keep saying this no matter how angry people get, that 2% inflation target is 2% too high. But when you're trying to target 2% and you're annualizing at 4.9%, that's a giant problem. The core number, as usual, was just really sticky and flat. So you had the regular number, the regular CPI coming out, the core flat. And then on top of all of that, I continue to express skepticism on how understated the CPI is. Just as my favorite example, last month's report claims that food inflation was 2.2%. Again, I ask this question every month. I'm going to ask it again. If you're listening to this and your grocery bill is up only 2% in the last month, please message me, comment, let me know, because you will be the first. I've been asking this question for 2 years, and I have not found a single person who will tell me, yeah, my grocery bill is only up 2%. Every number, every answer I've ever gotten on that question since I've been asking it for the last 2 years ranges somewhere between 20% and 50%. So, people aren't even close. If your grocery bill is up only 2%, put it in the comments. I'd love to read it and find out what in the world you guys are buying.
Yeah, and then Gary and I will pack our bags and head out your way immediately. So,
Yeah.
Gary, with this trend, what are we seeing on the horizon for rate cuts rest of the year?
So, Rob, that's a great question, and this is an area where I'm actually really proud of the work Deep Knowledge Investing has done on this topic. Rolling into 2024, when we were at the end of 23, people talked about the projections for the year, and the general consensus was 6 rate cuts for a total of 1.5%, starting in January, and if not in January, maybe March. And at the time, Deep Knowledge Investing said, absolutely not a chance, no way, it's not going to happen. Coming into this last inflation report, there was an expectation that we would get 3 rate cuts for 75 basis points. That's 0.75%. Starting, maybe June, people were kind of 50-50 on June. Again, that's a situation where, you look back at prior video editions of the 5 things, we've said, we're taking the under. We don't believe that number either. Now the conversation is somewhere between 0 and 2 cuts starting in September. The issue with that for the incumbents in Washington is that's going to be too late to provide stimulus for them to run on. So, if you're pro-incumbent, this is bad news for you. If you're anti-incumbent and want to see more turnover in Washington, this is good news for you. So whichever side you're on, you can, you have your rooting interests on this. At the end of the day, I suspect we're not going to get rate cuts this year. If we do, maybe one of them. It's difficult to predict, so much so, and we're going to have charts on this out in our April letter, which we'll have out later this month. But, our intern, Andrew Brown, and I have done the analysis on this, and the Federal Reserve is horrible at predicting future interest rates. Right? We've got charts on this. And so the Fed, they give you their projections. They have no idea. But Rob, there's one last point on this that's worth making, which is just a month or two ago, had anybody said the Fed might raise rates this year, people would have said, you're completely crazy. It's not going to happen. Well, guess what? Now there are serious people who are, good economists saying there's a real possibility the Fed could raise this year. Now, I don't think that's likely. And I don't think that's likely simply for the reason that if Powell does that, the howls out of people claiming that it's an unexpected political move will be enough to tarnish his legacy. And I think he's somebody who cares a lot about his legacy. You could argue that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that's just who he is. And so, just a month ago, people would have said that's crazy. But now there are serious people saying we could get rate hikes this year.